it's very much in our nature to spend our time either with that top 20% because it's fun for us to see the reps who are really strong in closing deals, or the 10% because we see them flailing and we want to improve their performance and we want to save them. No sales leader enjoys, losing employees, right?
At Elements of Culture, we sit down with experts in leadership and team building to explore the DNA that drives a thriving organization. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Elements of Culture. My name is Taryn, and I'm joined with my co-host, Julie. And today we have the pleasure of speaking with Angela Baker. She's the VP of Sales at Perceptix. This is an AI-powered platform for employees specifically. And Angela comes with a wide variety of background as far as sales leadership and driving revenue with teams. So we're so excited you're here with us today, Angela.
Thanks so much for having me. It's lovely to meet you.
Of course. So before we dive into things, I know we're going to talk leadership. We're going to talk about what you're seeing in trends as far as sales coaching and lots of different things that we'll dive into. But before we do that, I want to just dig a little bit into your background, your journey. As a sales leader, you're now in a VP of sales role at Perceptix. Tell us a bit how you've gotten to where you are and what you love so much about sales.
Yeah. So I actually started my career journey in tech on the customer success side. I was fresh out of school. I actually was interviewing for a BDR role, was effectively being offered the job. And the final step in the process, I met with the chief revenue officer and he said to me, Angela, you don't seem that passionate about sales. I have this other idea for a role. What do you think? And it was a CS role. And at the time, I kind of jumped on it. And I was CSM number one, sitting on a floor, a very, very noisy sales floor with techno music playing and them cold calling. And I looked around at all these salespeople and said, I could never do that. What kind of crazy person would ever go into sales? And truly, I think had I taken that BDR role, I probably wouldn't be where I am today, funnily enough. But yeah, I started in customer success, ended up moving to a company called Alita, where I was for nearly 9 years. And during that time, working customer success, I actually started doing expansion sales, got involved in the sales process, kind of just fell in love with it. So fully moved into sales, was doing individual contributor role for many years, and then ended up moving up to leadership. Left Alita just over a year ago now. Went to another company, Monday.com, where I was managing an enterprise account management team based in London. I'm Canadian originally, but I'm based in London now, which was a great experience. Alita was a much smaller organization, so got to see what it was like to work at a very, very large organization, more of a transactional sales cycle. But ultimately, I missed enterprise style sales. So a few months ago, my old CEO called me and we ended up talking about his new company, Perceptix, and it just seemed like a perfect fit for me. So I'm about 6 weeks into the role now as VP Sales for EMEA.
Well, wonderful. Congratulations on moving into a new role, a new position. It sounds like, you're really going to bring a lot of value to the team and with the expansion with Perceptix. So thank you so much for that history. Let's go ahead and dive into what you've seen, what you've experienced as far as sales leadership or just leadership in general. What advice, you've probably had some great coaches along the way. What is some great advice that you've received maybe from some standout leaders in your life that's really helped to lead you to where you're at?
Yeah, I remember when I first moved from individual contributor to leadership, my head of sales was giving me some coaching, and he taught me this sales methodology. It came from General Electric, actually, and it's the 20-70-10 model. And what he explained to me is that if you look at your sales team, typically 20% fall in that top performer bucket. About 70% are sort of middle performers, and then 10% fall into this kind of bottom bucket. And as sales leaders, it's very much in our nature to spend our time either with that top 20% because it's fun for us to see the reps who are really strong in closing deals, or the 10% because we see them flailing and we want to improve their performance and we want to save them. No sales leader enjoys, losing employees, right? And so we just gravitate to spending time in either of those two buckets. But ultimately, where we really, really need to be spending our time is that 70% in the middle, where they're kind of mediocre, have the potential, and just need a little bit more coaching to maybe get up into that top 20%. And that was something he taught me from day one. And I was very lucky when I first moved into leadership. I kind of started with a smaller team, which was great for my development. And then the longer I've been in leadership, sort of the larger the teams have grown. And so when you're managing, 9, 10 people, I really revert back to that model because it is unfortunately, you don't get the same amount of face time with every single one of your reports. So it is so important to be able to acknowledge your time spent as a leader and spend your time adequately. So it's something that I revert back to all the time when I'm thinking about performers and really encourage other sales leaders to think the same.
I definitely love that because I think that's the first time I've actually heard that. So I think I really love that. So let me ask you this. You have been in sales leadership. Is there that's some great advice that was given to you, and obviously you still use it. Is there any misconceptions that you have learned along the way that was supposed to be good advice, but then you realize in scaling or in leadership, like, hey, like this is actually not the way, or maybe even times have changed and you had to
Yeah.
adapt. Is there anything about that you could tell other younger leaders about, like, hey, this is a misconception about scaling your team or building great leaders?
Yeah. I think one misconception is the more reps you hire, the more deals you'll have. And that's not true. More reps do not equal more pipeline. Usually, what it means is that you just have the same amount of pipeline spread across more reps, unless you have some reps who are really, really good at self generating. Um, and I've seen companies when they're going through a really good period when the team's hitting and they just want to hire so fast. I even had this at my previous organization. My team, every single one of them were hitting. So they said, okay, let's double the team. Let's not add one or two, let's double the team. And it went, everyone's books were cut in half. And then it ended up being for a fight for them to hit numbers. So I think you really want to make sure, especially if you're a rep joining a new organization or a leader joining a new organization, you want to understand how many of your peers or the reps are hitting their numbers. And it's so important to, as much as we want to scale slowly within reason, you want your whole team really to be hitting or close to it before you hire more people. And also keep in mind that the more reps you have, the more support staff you need. So you're going to need more customer success managers to manage the accounts. You're going to need revenue operations and solutions engineers and everyone else who supports you. So if you hire a ton of AEs, but then you only still have a couple of solutions engineers, you're actually not even going to be able to scale the amount of deals that you're running anyway. So yeah, scale slowly and hire two at a time most. Don't go crazy.
That's great advice.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I've certainly seen some people go all in, like completely restructure and identify the roles that they want to fill, and they do it so quickly that you're right. So then your core team of salespeople find themselves like so frustrated.
Yeah.
And when you've got frustrated salespeople, they're not as determined to go hit the numbers that they need hit because business and territories or whatever that looks like is
Yeah.
being split.
Yeah. And you have to account for ramp as well, right? All these new employees are
Yeah.
going to need the ramp time. So just because you hire them all doesn't mean you're going to get results out of them right away.
Right, right. That's so good. So, and then I know, Angela, that you're still new in the role at Perceptix. So there's probably
Yeah.
a lot of things that you're learning, things that you're taking in and just getting
Hmm.
ideas as you continue to ramp up in the role with your team there. But maybe you could refer to some previous seasons as well. But what would you say are some key things that really kind of holds teams back from performing at their peak, whether it be from the leadership side, but also on the individual sales level as well? What are some of those things that would keep them from achieving where they could potentially be?
Yeah. I mean, I think if you look at, holding teams back from performing at their peak, there's probably two buckets. So one is more on that performance side. So thinking about that consistency of building pipeline and quota attainment. And then the other bucket is a little bit more on the personal side. So that's when you're thinking about burnout. Um, Enterprise sales in particular, which is my background, it really kind of goes in phases. So especially when you're a new rep joining, there's going to be this phase of building pipeline. You're not going to have deals right away. Your sales cycles take longer. And it is very possible to go a quarter or two without actually closing anything. So you're going through this period of building pipeline. And then hopefully you're getting to this place where you have a lot of pipeline and it's actually really difficult for you to find the time to prospect. And you're just really, really focused on closing, which is great. You're closing all these deals, but then they're all closed, and then you realize the following quarter you're potentially back at zero. Um, and so then you have to go through this rebuild phase. And so I think that inconsistency of building pipeline, that can be really, really challenging to have teams perform. You really need to make sure that you're somehow finding that time to build it consistently so that you're not having these ups and downs and teams are performing fairly consistently at their peak. And it's one thing to lose a deal because you've lost to a competitor, but I think one very consistent pattern that I have found when reps aren't performing is just that consistency around prospecting. My stance always when I was a rep is I was responsible to get to my own number. And I had to do enough prospecting and build enough pipeline for me to get there. And anything else, any inbound from marketing, anything passed from my BDR, that was a cherry on top, but I was responsible for that. And, some reps just aren't always addressing that. And I think that is, if I can say, the number one performance issue. No sales leader is ever going to say they have enough pipeline. And that would be one thing on the performance side. On the burnout side, that's a little bit harder for a sales leader to address. I think it's just so important to lead with empathy. I'm incredibly lucky that my CEO is a very empathetic CEO, which is why I'm working for him again. But as a leader, you really have to make sure that reps are taking vacations. I'm a very hands-on leader. I like to be really involved in deals. For me, a bad week is if I don't have customer calls and I'm just on forecast calls. I want to be really, really involved. So, I make sure that when my team are going off, I've been involved in the deals that I can truly cover for them when they're off and that they can disconnect and come back refreshed. I have a rep who's worked for me at 3 companies now and he's wonderful, but I always tell him his worst trait is that he never books vacation. And so if he gets to this point, he's hustling and hustling and then he burns out. And it's such a controllable thing that impacts his performance. So it's just, yeah, that time, work-life balance, time off, that's so important to address performance peaks and burnout.
Yeah. So when you're discussing burnout, I think about wellness. So talk to me a little bit about how you help incorporate wellness into your teams and into leadership development, because I would assume that goes well hand in hand. Just like you just said, you have one that doesn't take vacations. And how do you help in the implementation of that wellness side to drive measurements and impact and
Yeah, I mean, I think wellness, it needs to be a foundation. It needs to be balanced, right? Any sales leader should know that a burnt out sales team can't perform. I don't think wellness should be considered a benefit. It needs to be that foundation for resilience. Um, I think, promoting work-life balance is with your team is the number one way to keep them happy, but also keep them happy and healthy. And then they don't need the time off. Sorry, I mean for sick leave. If they're healthier, they're not getting ill. At Perceptix, actually, we encourage flexible working hours. So sales isn't really a 9 to 5. Probably salespeople aren't going to be the top performers by only working 8 hours a day. But let's call a spade a spade. There are a lot of hours in sales. Um, but what I do really encourage is that, okay, maybe they're working long days, but they can go to the gym at lunch. If they need to go take a walk in the middle of the day, they can do all those kinds of things to make sure that they're getting air, to make sure that they're embedding wellness into their day to day so that by the time 9 o'clock comes around at night, they haven't just been sitting in front of their computer. And I really encourage them to build their schedules however they need to. And if they're morning people and want to get up early and do work in the morning, they can. If they aren't morning people and they need to work in the evening and that works best for them, do it. But however, health, fitness, balance can be incorporated into their schedules is so important.
Yeah, I would agree. As you were talking about burnout and in sales, it's easy to do that because I think a lot of
Hmm.
salespeople are motivated. You're driven, so you're going after that
Yeah.
next deal, and so that can just really, like you said, create that burnout. And I don't know if you've seen this too, Angela, but over the last few years, it seems like companies are having to put more of an emphasis on wellness because it's become a priority, and you can't have an effective team that's hitting their quotas, that's hitting those revenue goals, if that's not become a priority. And what we've seen too, really since COVID shifted everything, the pandemic did, the work remote, and a lot of companies were remote prior to that. But I think
Hmm.
companies are having to restructure some of their interactions with their staff and what they expect out of employees because you can't bring your whole self to work if you're not whole mentally or physically and you're not taking care of those fundamental pieces. So I think that that's so good. Are you seeing, just in your experience as well as, maybe old colleagues or network of people that companies are putting more of an emphasis in that? What are you seeing there with wellness specifically outside of your direct team?
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, I really love working for an employee experience company because they really, really do care about their employees. And Perceptix is actually a fully remote company. I know a lot of companies have shifted back to the office or hybrid model. My previous companies were. Um, so I think it sounds silly, but when you're a fully remote company, I almost think it's forgotten about a little bit more by the individual because it's so easy to just sit down first thing in the morning. Maybe you haven't even showered yet and you just start working because you want to get ahead of things. And then you realize it's noon and you still haven't showered. I'm the worst. My dog will literally fall asleep in my lap. And so I physically can't get up. And then I just don't move all day. So I think when you're working from home, it's that much more important to put things in your calendars and schedule breaks. Make your calendar private. People don't need to know that you're going for a walk in the middle of the day, because if that's actually what's most important to you and that's what's going to make you most productive, make you feel best, then that's absolutely what you need to do. When the pandemic hit, I remember every day at the end of my workday just feeling so exhausted. And I was trying to figure out, why am I so tired? I'm working from home all the time. I'm not dealing with commuting anymore, all these things. And it's just like staring at a screen all day and not getting that fresh air. It is more exhausting. And here's a little tip. I actually read this article. We as humans aren't supposed to know what we look like when we speak. And so there was this whole thing when you start watching yourself on Zoom speaking, you're so aware of what your hands are doing and your face and all these things. And so it's actually more exhausting. So there's a little tip. Turn off your self view on Zoom so you don't know what you look like.
That's so interesting as we all sit here on the screen, like watching ourselves and talking with our hands. And I'm
I
like
need
the
to go for
worst.
one.
I have to really control the hand motions there. So I just try to hold it together.
Hold them both on the
Angela, I
screen.
would love to hear your just your concepts about leadership development and how you go
Mhm.
about developing leaders and making them not just great at just revenue and sales, but leading others and managing teams. Like, what does that look like? Because I know the leadership, what corporate America looks like now is not what it looked like 10, 15 years ago. And so I can see the leadership styles changing for the better. What would be some advice that you can give somebody who is coaching leaders and young leaders that are coming into the role, and that could really impact them to not only have like great revenue and great sales, that's all great, but what about a healthy team?
Yeah, and I mean, that's a great question. And I think leadership development is so important. It's something that's often forgotten about, unfortunately, at organizations. And it's also something that if you look at a sales team, there's often not that opportunity. And then maybe one person gets that opportunity, but not the others. I think it's so important, especially if you're a new leader. Make sure that your one on ones are not forecast calls. Make sure that they're really conversations around a rep's development, where they want to go. One thing that I always say is a good individual contributor in sales is going to make way more money than their manager. I want all of my reps to make way more money than me. And I have some reps that just want to be individual contributors for their careers and just make lots of money. And that's very fulfilling for them. And that's wonderful. But if they are reps who want to move into leadership, you need to make sure that you're having those developmental conversations. Ultimately, it's going to actually help improve their performance, because it's going to give them something to work towards. It'll feed their ambition, creating the leaders of tomorrow. Like, you really have to make sure that when you should you ever decide to leave or something happen, that you've got someone there who could step into your shoes. And so I think it's just important to identify those opportunities. So for example, SDRs, they also need mentorship. So I have a rep who is interested in that leadership path. I don't have a leadership role open right now, but what I do have is an incredibly ambitious team of SDRs who need mentorship. So we find opportunities that way. Building buddies, things like that that you can teach others. I always feel that every time I teach someone something, I get better at it myself and I remind myself how to do it. So it's kind of a win win by giving them those opportunities. And it's just really important for companies to have, an education system within the company, ways of giving them coaching. And that, if we're all just focused on deals and nothing else, we are going to get burnout. And for me, it's always those things that go beyond the deals that are really, really exciting in the role. So yeah, that's my advice to young leaders, is just making sure that you are giving that dedicated time to coaching and not just forecasting.
Yeah, that's so good. I think it's really about seeing your team, right? And spending
Yeah.
time with them and seeing them outside, like not as just a contributor, not as just an employee. And I think that's where one thing, as this podcast is called Elements of Culture. And so, in order to have a healthy culture and a healthy work environment, that culture is so important to be established. Yes, you should be go-getters and you should have a team that's motivated, but you also have to see your team at the individual level in order to have that healthy culture. So I want to take just a moment and talk to you about the future of leadership. And that kind of goes hand in hand with culture. What are some things, some trends that you're seeing? And even at Perceptix, I know that you're still new in your role specifically, but you're probably transferring over a lot of the things that you've learned, what you've brought in from previous roles. What are you seeing as far as trends in leadership? Where do you think foresee things going, and what leaders really need to be mindful of and put their hands on as they continue to implement new strategies with their teams?
Yeah, I mean, I think the biggest thing is kind of just what you said. Leaders need to be able to look at each of their team members as human beings, as individuals, and continue to do that. I mean, if anyone in any industry right now gets asked a question around trends, there's no way that the letters AI are not in their response. AI is so part of their lives for better or for worse. Everyone has mixed feelings on it. And it can be used in really, really wonderful ways. Like we have an AI coaching tool within our platform. And that's really helpful for me because what it does is it actually identifies behaviors that I'm doing within in my day to day and actually provides me coaching opportunities with my team and sort of gives me tips on how to address things, which is wonderful. But, we do have to be careful around AI. I once had a colleague and I asked him how he was getting all his performance reviews done so efficiently. And he told me that he used AI to write all his team's performance reviews. So we have to be really, really, really careful. And I think the biggest thing is just finding ways as leaders to support your teams, but also just encourage their growth, being available to them and being their support system whilst not doing their job for them, helping them identify ways to be more effective in their time management. Where can they leverage AI that will be helpful in their role? Trends in terms of making their jobs a little bit more scalable in themselves, not just the team. Like, how do they scale themselves within their job? How are they able to juggle a lot of different deals at one time and manage prospecting? So I think a lot of that kind of leaning in on like time management and coaching in that direction.
So AI is definitely controversial. So I know that it's cool. I think it can be helpful. And I think just like you said, someone's using it for performance management. Like that just sounds like a
Yeah.
disaster. But is there a tool or resource that you've incorporated to
Mm.
help transform your sales team in any way? Like that you can think of, not even now, just like
Yeah.
in the history of managing teams?
Yeah. I mean, I think a tech stack for a sales team is critically important. I'm going to just not rocket science. We're going to start with the most basic. I think it really starts with a strong CRM implementation. It's not an area where a sales org can cut corners. I was really blessed with my first couple companies had incredibly strong Salesforce implementations, which I didn't appreciate until I went to a company that did not. The one that was actually most transactional and probably needed a really, really strong one. And so that to me, having that CRM tool, it's going to help with everything I just said in terms of reps being more scalable, manage their time better, just create visibility within the organization. So I know that's a cop out answer in sales, but I really, really think the CRM needs to be properly implemented to, pull quotes, do contacts, all of those things. If it's not easy to use, the reps won't update it. But aside from a strong CRM, my favorite tool of all time is Gong. I'm not paid by Gong. I don't sponsor Gong, but I love Gong. If you're not familiar, it is a call recording tool, but there's also coaching opportunities within it. You can embed a lot of sort of your sales methodology, discovery questions that you want to ask, so it can kind of provide coaching. And it's allowed me as a sales leader to be so much more scalable because I don't need to be on every customer call to understand what's going on. I can listen to the recordings back. I can get transcripts. Their AI is incredible. Their use of AI is very, very strong. Um, and I remember when I brought it into my previous organization, I was worried that reps would be a little bit apprehensive about having it, but they actually loved it because it allowed them to scale themselves and actually reach out to me for feedback. And I can listen to a call and then tag my team and even say, like, listen to the way that this rep approached this question around our differentiators or competitors. And it's such a way to enable and like, sharing knowledge across the team. So I love Gong.
Okay.
That sounds like a great tool. I'm not familiar with Gong. I'm familiar with some other tools, but that does like more of the recap and kind of points things out. You can kind of refer
Mhm.
back to it and share that with the team, which I think is phenomenal. But the coaching side of it sounds so great, I think, as a leader. So I know you're not sponsored by them, but hey, shout out to Gong. Okay, so as we wrap up, first of all, I want to
Mhm.
say thank you for your time and just
Sure,
kind of
thank
sharing
you.
your leadership, your experiences, and what you're seeing with trends and how you scale a team. I want to ask you one question, though, specifically as we wrap up. And, you may have a couple different answers. That's okay too. But if you had all the time in the world to focus on one thing, what was that one thing be to help you and your team get to your dream state? What would that look like?
I love coaching. I when I moved from individual contributor to leader, I knew with I think in a span of hours that I was in the right role because I love coaching. I'm so much more excited for my team when they like not only close the deal but do well on a call than ever I was for myself. That to me, seeing a rep like listen to coaching and be able to adapt them and then grow their career, that's so fulfilling for me. If I had all the time in the world, I would just spend it all coaching. I could totally be on like an enablement side and just spend time coaching. And that was the really nice thing when I first moved into leadership and had the small team. I was able to be so hands on with them and teaching them. And that has been, the challenge for myself and scaling myself as my teams have gotten larger is not getting quite as much hands-on time with my team. So how do I make sure that all of those interactions are, really helpful for them and I can do as much coaching as I can. I love it.
So, for the sake of scaling, are you hiring and where can people get in touch with you and find you?
Yeah. Um, Not hiring quite yet, but I will be very soon. So please reach out. LinkedIn's the best way. So my name's Angela Baker. I believe my LinkedIn URL is just linkedin.com/Baker Angela. But yeah, I'm VP at Perceptix, so you can find me there.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much, Angela, for jumping on with us on Elements of Culture podcast. It's been a pleasure just spending a few minutes with you. And thanks again for sharing just some of your leadership tips with all of those that are watching.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Angela. We appreciate it.